My sister told everyone I was ashamed of her, so I let the truth speak at her graduation. For years, I was my sister's living, breathing secret keeper, until the day she told the world I was the one to be ashamed of. Hey everyone, before we get into the video, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button if you want more stories just like this. Thanks for the support. My name is Oliver, and I am 22 years old. The weight of my sister's secrets began as a small, smooth stone in my pocket, barely noticeable. Over the years, it transformed into a collection of jagged rocks, each one a memory I carried for her, until the bag was so heavy I could barely stand. The day she stood in our living room, surrounded by family and friends, and announced I was ashamed of her, the bag finally ripped open. But to understand how we got there, you have to go back to the beginning, to a time when the stones were still small and easy to hide. Our childhood was a carefully constructed stage, and Skylar was the star. I was just the stagehand, making sure the lights stayed on and the props were in place, even when she was trying to knock them all down. I was 4 years older, and from the moment she could talk, I understood my role: protect Skylar. Not from monsters under the bed, but from the consequences of her own making. It started with small things. A shattered porcelain doll, a gift from our grandmother. I found the pieces hidden under her bed, and when our mother asked, I said I'd been running in the house and knocked it off the dresser. The stern look I received was worth it to see the relief in Skylar's wide, 5-year-old eyes. AC. On a spelling test, she crumpled and tried to flush. I fished it out, smoothed it as best I could, and told our father I was helping her study, and we must have gotten the words mixed up. He ruffled my hair, proud of my big brotherly diligence, while Skylar watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable. Our parents were good people, but they were tired. They worked long hours, and they trusted me. They saw me as the responsible one, the rock. Skylar was the free spirit, the creative one, the one who needed room to breathe. I became the filter between Skylar's reality and their perception. I was the translator for her chaos. As we got older, the secrets grew in size and scope. It wasn't just broken dolls anymore. It was the phone call from her middle school principal saying she'd skip her last 3 classes. I was the one who answered, my heart pounding, and concocted a story about a sudden, violent stomach bug that I'd forgotten to call in about. I promised to bring in a doctor's note the next day, a note I would spend the evening skillfully forging. It was the party she wasn't supposed to attend, the one where the parents were out of town. She snuck out the window, and I stayed awake, my stomach in knots, until I heard the faint click of the window latch at 2 in the morning. She smelled of smoke and cheap beer, and I helped her into the shower, laid out her pajamas, and brewed coffee for our parents the next morning, explaining that Skylar had just had a late night studying. The lie was so seamless it scared me. I was becoming an expert in deception, all for her. And what did I get in return? Distance. At school, she was vibrant and popular, surrounded by a circle of friends who knew nothing of the girl I knew at home. If I approached her in the hallway, she would turn away, pretending she didn't see me. To her peers, I was just the weird, quiet older brother who didn't fit in her world. The protection I offered came with a condition: my invisibility. I accepted it. I told myself it was part of the job, that I was doing the right thing, keeping the family peace, keeping my parents from worrying. I was the keeper of the peace, the guardian of the image. But every secret I kept was a brick in a wall between us. The higher the wall grew, the less of her I could see, until all I was protecting was a silhouette of a person I no longer recognized. The day I found the crumpled parking ticket under the passenger seat of my car, dated for a night I knew for a fact I had been home studying, was the day I realized the stones had become boulders. She had taken my car without asking, driven to a part of town she knew was forbidden, and gotten caught. She never said a word. I just paid the fine online, my hands shaking as I typed in my credit card number. I never confronted her. I just added it to the pile. The weight was becoming unbearable, and a dark thought began to form in the back of my mind. What if I just stopped carrying it? High school was a masterclass in compartmentalization for me. There was home Oliver, who navigated the minefield of his sister's lies, and school Oliver, who tried desperately to focus on his own future. The two versions of myself were becoming strangers, and the strain was starting to show. Skylar's secrets escalated from reckless to dangerous. It was no longer about skipping class. It was about the company she kept when she skipped. I'd see her from a distance, climbing into a car with boys who were already men. Their faces hardened in a way that spoke of lives far more difficult than our own. My nights were spent not on homework, but on staring at my phone, waiting for a text that would tell me she was safe. A text that rarely came. I became a digital detective, scrolling through her social media when she left her phone unlocked. It was a curated gallery of perfect moments, smiling selfies with friends, filtered pictures of sunsets, captions about blessed days. But I knew how to look deeper. I'd see the reflection in her sunglasses, the unfamiliar interior of a dingy apartment. I'd zoom in on the background of a group photo, recognizing the graffiti on a wall in a neighborhood known for gang activity. I was collecting evidence of a life she was hiding, a life I was actively helping her hide. The emotional toll was a slow-acting poison. I developed a nervous twitch in my left eye. I lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. My grades, once my source of pride, began to slip. My guidance counselor pulled me aside, asking if everything was okay at home. I just smiled and said I was stressed about college applications. The lie was so easy now it was like breathing. My parents saw Skylar's straight A report cards I had intercepted, replacing the real ones, littered with D's and F's, with expertly crafted forgeries. They saw her glowing smile and heard her talk about her amazing friends. They saw a success story. They never saw the girl who would come home at 3 a.m, reeking of vodka and tears, and collapse on her bed without a word. They never saw me, holding her hair back as she got sick, cleaning her up, and tucking her in, only to lie awake in my own bed, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The worst part was the gaslighting. The next day, if I ever dared to mention her late-night escapades, she would look at me with such genuine confusion that I would start to question my own sanity. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she'd say, her voice laced with a sweet, innocent venom. I was at Lily's house studying. We were up all night reviewing for Kim. You can ask her mom. And I knew Lily's mom would back up the story, because Skylar was a master at weaving a web of complicity, pulling in friends who were either dazzled by her charisma or too scared to contradict her. I was the only one who knew the truth, and my isolation was absolute. The breaking point, the one that should have changed everything but didn't, came on a rainy Tuesday in October. I got a call from a block number. It was the police. Skylar had been at a house party that had been busted. Several kids were being taken to the station for underage drinking. My blood ran cold. But the officer on the phone wasn't calling about Skylar. He was calling about me. Apparently, Skylar had told them the car she was parked in belonged to her friend, and she had given them my name and my driver's license number when they asked for ID. She had used my identity to try and shield herself. I drove to the police station in a daze, the rain blurring the street lights into streaks of color. I found her sitting in a sterile waiting room, her makeup streaked with tears, looking small and terrified. The moment she saw me, the terror vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated relief. She knew I would save her, and I did. I lied to the officer, saying I'd lent her my car and my ID because I was helping her run an errand for our sick mother. I took the blame, accepted the stern lecture, and paid the hefty fine for a minor in possession. As we walked out of the station into the damp night air, she didn't say thank you. She just said, "You can't tell Mom and Dad. They'll kill me." I looked at her, at the girl whose life I had just willingly derailed to protect, and I felt nothing. No anger, no love, just a vast, empty void. I nodded, and in that moment, I knew I wasn't her brother anymore. I was her accomplice, and the weight of that realization was heavier than any secret I had ever kept. The incident at the police station should have been my line in the sand, a moment of clarity where I finally put myself first. But old habits die hard, and the web of lies was too intricately woven into the fabric of our family. I continued my role as the silent guardian, the fixer. Skylar, emboldened by my unwavering protection, became even more brazen. The rest of her senior year was a blur of near misses and last-minute saves. There was the college application to a prestigious art school that I had to practically write for her, crafting essays about her passion and dedication while she was out at concerts. There was the designer suit and shoes she charged to our parents' credit card without permission for graduation, a bill I intercepted and paid off with the money I'd saved from my part-time job. Each act of preservation chipped away another piece of my soul. I was a ghost haunting my own life, my own future plans put on hold to manage the crisis of hers. Graduation season arrived, and with it, a suffocating pressure. Skylar was graduating with honors, or so everyone believed. The forged report cards had worked. She was the valedictorian of her own fabricated story. The house was constantly filled with relatives, all beaming with pride for the girl who had overcome so much to achieve so little. The Sunday before the ceremony, our parents hosted a graduation party. The house was filled with the scent of barbecue and the sound of forced laughter. Skylar was in her element, flitting from group to group, the radiant star of the show. I stayed in the kitchen, refilling chip bowls and collecting empty cups, content in my invisibility. I watched her hold court, telling animated stories about her academic triumphs and her tight-knit group of friends. She was a captivating storyteller, spinning a reality so vivid you almost believed it. Then, her eyes found me from across the room. A small, sharp smile played on her lips. She motioned for me to come over. My stomach clenched, but I obliged, weaving through the crowd towards her. "Everyone," she said, her voice cutting through the din, her arm draping possessively around my shoulders. "I want you to meet my brother, Oliver." A few people murmured greetings. I gave a tight, uncomfortable smile. "You know," Skylar continued, her voice taking on a wistful, tragic tone that immediately drew everyone in. "I couldn't have done it without my family. But it wasn't always easy." She paused, looking down at the floor as if gathering the strength to speak a difficult truth. The room grew quiet. "Oliver and I, we haven't always been close. He's always been so perfect. The perfect student, the perfect son. And I guess he was always a little ashamed of me. Of my messy art, my loud friends, my big dreams." She looked up at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears that I knew were as fake as her report cards. "He never came to my art shows. He never wanted to hang out with my friends. He always acted like I was this big disappointment. But I want you all to know," she said, her voice cracking with manufactured emotion, "that I forgive him. And today, we're starting fresh." A collective ah went through the crowd. My aunt patted my arm sympathetically. My uncle shot me a disappointed look. My parents just looked confused. I stood there, frozen, her arms still around me like a snake. The words hit me like physical blows. Ashamed, she had twisted my every act of protection into a narrative of neglect. My invisibility, my silence, the things I did to keep her world from imploding, she had reframed them as acts of scorn. The air was thick with pity for her and judgment for me. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, a hot, prickly wave of humiliation. For years, I had swallowed her lies, digested them, and carried them in my gut. But this lie was different. It wasn't a secret I was keeping for her. It was a poison she was injecting directly into my veins. In front of everyone I loved, I looked at her face, at the triumphant glint in her eye that no one else could see. She thought she had won. She had publicly cemented her role as the victim and cast me as the villain. And in that moment, something inside me, a dam I'd been building for years, finally broke. The weight of the secrets, the lies, the sacrifices, it all vanished, replaced by a single, cold, clear thought. The game was over. I gently removed her arm from my shoulder. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, my expression completely blank, and walked away. I went to my room, closed the door, and for the first time in a decade, I felt nothing but a quiet, steady calm. The reckoning was coming. The silence in my bedroom was a sanctuary. Outside, I could hear the muffled sounds of the party continuing, the celebration of a lie. But in here, there was only the sound of my own breathing, even and slow. The humiliation from the living room had evaporated, replaced by a crystalline clarity. I was no longer her brother, her protector, or her victim. I was a witness, and it was time to testify. The next 3 days were a blur of focused, methodical purpose. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply prepared. I became an archivist of my own misery, carefully curating the evidence of the life I had lived in the shadows. I didn't do it out of revenge, or at least, that's not what I told myself. I did it for the boy who had taken the blame for the broken doll, for the teenager who had forged doctor's notes, for the young man who had paid a fine for a crime he didn't commit. I was doing it for me. I started in my desk drawer, a place I hadn't cleaned out in years. Tucked in the back was a manila envelope. Inside were the original, crumpled report cards from her freshman and sophomore years, the ones with the C's and D's in math and science. Next to them, I placed the pristine forgeries I had created, the ones with the A's and B's. The contrast was stark, a perfect illustration of the duality of her life. I moved to my laptop. I opened a folder, one I had cryptically labeled Skylar, school stuff. Inside was a digital treasure trove of her deception. There were screenshots of frantic text messages I'd sent her over the years, all left on read. Asterisk, where are you? At 1 a.m. Asterisk, please just tell me you're safe. I got a call from school. They said you didn't show up to your exam. There were emails from her teachers expressing concern about her absences and her slipping grades, emails I had answered, pretending to be our mother. I found a receipt for the $800 designer suit, the charge from my own depleted bank account. I even found the digital scan of the police report from the night she used my name, a document I had kept as a grim reminder of my own complicity. Each piece of evidence was a stone I was picking up, not to throw at her, but to build a foundation of truth. The graduation ceremony was on Friday. It was the perfect stage. It was her day, her moment of triumph, built entirely on a foundation of my silence. To expose her anywhere else would be cruel. But to expose her there, in the moment of her greatest, most fraudulent victory, felt like a strange, poetic form of justice. It wasn't about destroying her. It was about reclaiming my own narrative. On Thursday night, I printed everything out. The report cards, the emails, the receipts. I put them all into a new, crisp manila envelope. I didn't plan to stand up and wave the papers around like a crazed accuser. That wasn't my style. The truth, I had learned, was more powerful when it was spoken calmly, when it was presented not as an attack, but as a story that, for once, would be my own. I thought about what I would say. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't cry. I would just state the facts one by one, like laying down cards on a table. I would talk about the porcelain doll, the forged notes, the parking tickets, the stolen identity. I would paint a picture of a girl who wasn't a victim of a neglectful brother, but a master manipulator who had been enabled by one. I would end by telling them I wasn't ashamed of her. I was ashamed of myself for letting it go on for so long. The morning of the graduation, I woke up before my alarm. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a pale, gray light over my room. I got dressed, putting on a simple, modest button-down shirt and slacks. I looked at myself in the mirror. The dark circles under my eyes were still there, but the nervous twitch was gone. My face looked calm, almost serene. I picked up the envelope from my desk. It felt light in my hands. Downstairs, the house was a flurry of last-minute activity. My parents were running around with cameras, and Skylar was in her cap and gown, preening in front of the hallway mirror. She saw me come down the stairs and gave me a tight, superior smile, the kind of smile that said, "I won." I just looked back at her, my expression unreadable, and walked into the kitchen to pour a cup of coffee. The envelope was in my bag. The words were in my head. The car ride to the auditorium was silent, save for my father's cheerful, oblivious chatter. I sat in the back seat, looking out the window, watching the world go by. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't excited. I was ready. The moment Skylar had least expected was about to become the moment everything changed. And I was the one who was going to change it. The university auditorium was a cavern of anticipation. It smelled of flowers, new polyester gowns, and the faint, electric scent of 1,000 buzzing smartphones. We found our seats in the packed auditorium, my parents fumbling with their cameras, their faces alight with a pride that felt like a personal insult to me. Skylar sat between them, A vision of perfection in her white cap and gown, her name tag pinned perfectly over her heart. She soaked it all in. The whispered congratulations, the proud waves from friends, families, the sheer, unadulterated adoration. She glanced over at me once, a quick, dismissive flick of her eyes, as if to remind me of my place on the periphery of her perfect world. I just stared back, my face a mask of neutrality. The ceremony began with the usual procession of speeches. The dean welcomed everyone. The student body president gave a rambling, optimistic address about the future. I barely heard a word. My focus was singular, a laser beam aimed at the stage. I knew the program. I knew that after the diplomas were handed out, there was a short period for special recognitions from the audience, a tradition the school encouraged for family members to share a few words. It was usually a parade of tearful parents and sappy siblings. Today, it would be something else entirely. My heart was a steady, heavy drum in my chest, a rhythm of resolve, not fear. I watched as the line of graduates began to file across the stage. One by one, their names were called. I saw Skylar straighten up as a row stood. She walked with a practiced grace, a confident smile plastered on her face. When her name was called, Skylar Marie Jennings, she ascended the steps, shook the dean's hand with poise, and accepted her diploma, holding it up to the crowd like a trophy. Our parents erupted in cheers and flashes. I remained silent, my hands folded in my lap. She had done it. She had successfully pulled off the ultimate con. She had a diploma, a spot at a good college, and the unwavering love of her family, all built on a scaffolding of my lies. As she returned to her seat, basking in the final wave of applause, the dean returned to the podium. And now, he said, his voice booming through the hall, we'd like to open the floor for a few moments for family and friends to share some thoughts with our graduates. This was it. My blood didn't run cold. It didn't run hot. It simply ran. My parents looked at each other, and my mother elbowed my father, a silent command for him to stand up and say something proud and embarrassing. But before he could move, I was on my feet. The movement was so sudden and unexpected that my parents just stared, their mouths slightly agape. Skylar saw me standing, and a look of confusion, then annoyance, crossed her face. She probably thought I was going to make some grand, apologetic gesture to publicly beg for her forgiveness as she had generously offered at the party. A slow, smug smile began to form on her lips. I walked down the aisle of the auditorium, my steps measured and deliberate. A hush began to fall over the crowd, the whispers following me as I made my way to the side of the stage. A staff member looked at me questioningly, but I just gave a small, confident nod, and he gestured for me to approach the podium. The climb up the steps felt like the longest journey of my life. The polished wood of the podium felt cool and solid under my hands. I looked out at the sea of faces, a blur of expectation and curiosity. My eyes scanned the crowd until they found her. Skylar. Her smug smile was still in place, but it was faltering now, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She was starting to realize this was not going according to her script. I leaned towards the microphone. The click of it being activated echoed through the now silent auditorium. I took a deep breath, not to calm my nerves, but to center my purpose. I looked directly at my sister, and for the first time in a very long time, I let her see the truth in my eyes. The silence in the auditorium was absolute, a heavy, weighting thing. My voice, when I finally spoke, was calm and clear, devoid of any tremor. It was the voice of someone narrating a story they had told themselves 1,000 times. My sister, Skylar, just told you all a story a few days ago. I began, my gaze locked on her. She told you I was ashamed of her. And in a way, she's right. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. I saw my parents' faces contort in confusion and alarm. Skylar's smugness had completely vanished, replaced by a look of dawning horror. I am ashamed, I continued, my voice unwavering. I'm ashamed of the lies she has built her entire life upon, and I'm ashamed of myself for helping her build them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet, steady delivery was more powerful than any scream could ever be. When Skylar was 10, She broke our grandmother's porcelain doll. I took the blame. When she was 14, she failed 3 of her classes. I intercepted the report cards from the mail and spent an entire weekend forging new ones. Ones with straight A's, the kind of grades our parents expected. The ones she just graduated with. I could hear a sharp intake of breath from my mother's direction. When she was 16, she took my car without my permission and got a parking ticket in a part of town she had no business being in. I paid for it. When she was 17, she was caught at a party with alcohol. She gave the police my name and my driver's license. I went to the station and I took the blame, paid the fine, and accepted the lecture. Also, our parents would never know. I paused, letting the words sink in. I wasn't looking at the crowd anymore. My eyes were only for Skylar. Her face was pale, her perfect composure crumbling like a sandcastle in a rising tide. I was her alibi. I was her forger. I was her scapegoat. I wasn't ashamed of her friends or her dreams. I was trying to protect her from the consequences of her own choices. And my reward for that protection was to be publicly humiliated, painted as a cruel and neglectful brother. I stayed silent for years, thinking I was keeping our family together. But a family built on secrets isn't a family. It's a prison. And today, I'm setting myself free. I finished. There was no grand finale, no dramatic accusation. I just laid the truth on the table, simple and raw. The silence that followed was deafening. It was the sound of 1,000 people processing a reality that had just been shattered. Then, a sound broke the stillness. It was a small, choked sob. It came from Skylar. She didn't run. She didn't yell. She just broke. The weight of her own lies. The one she had so carefully constructed and so arrogantly displayed, finally came crashing down on her. The perfect facade was gone, and all that was left was a terrified, crying girl. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt a profound, aching sadness. I stepped away from the podium and walked back down the aisle. No one stopped me. No one said a word. They just watched me pass, their eyes wide with shock. I didn't go back to my seat. I walked out of the auditorium into the bright afternoon sun. I didn't look back. The car ride home was a silent, frozen hell. My parents didn't speak to me. They just stared straight ahead, their faces masks of disbelief and pain. When we got home, the confrontation was inevitable. It was a storm of tears and accusations. My parents struggling to reconcile the daughter they thought they knew with the truth I had laid bare. I answered their questions calmly, no longer hiding anything. The relationship was shattered, not just with Skylar, but with them, too. They felt betrayed by my silence, and I felt betrayed by their blindness. In the days that followed, I moved out. I took the small savings I had and found a tiny apartment. It was quiet, it was empty, and it was mine. I don't know what the future holds for my sister or for my family. I don't know if those relationships can ever be rebuilt. But for the first time in my life, that's not my burden to carry. I'm no longer the keeper of her secrets. I'm just Oliver. And that, I've realized, is more than enough.